live. Welcome to yet another episode of Military Family News with the National Military Family Association, otherwise known as NMFA, because as you know, in the military, we love our acronyms, right? We have a fantastic show for you today. Our guests are going to be amazing. I'm super, super excited. And while ordinarily we talk through some NMFA updates and some government relations updates, I'm going to hit you with those on the back end rather than the front end, because we really want to dive into this very huge conversation talking about voting across duty stations. I'd like to introduce my guests. I have Sarah Strader and Brittany Hannix of the Secure Families Initiative. Super excited to have you guys. Welcome.
Thanks, MJ. We're excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to give you the opportunity really quick. I'll have both of you go ahead and introduce yourselves to our audience. Tell us a little bit about what you do at SFI.
Happily. Well, at the baseline, I can kick us off. I'm the spouse of an active duty Space Force Guardian, but former Air Force. Gotta add that. We've been overseas for the last 3 years, but we're mid-PCS back to the States. But that's me on a personal level. In my role here, I'm the founder and executive director of Secure Families. We launched in 2020. I had some campaign experience, some government experience, and I was really frustrated to see lawmakers not really being responsive to our community in the ways that I thought they should. And I realized when you're not a voting bloc that's consistently enough, folks don't feel accountable to you. And so one of the catalyzing kind of passion areas for me launching SFI was to bridge that voter registration and voter participation gap. So this topic is near and dear to the heart, and we're just so glad that you're having us on, MJ.
Awesome. Brittany.
Hi, I'm Brittany. I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you for having me. I'm also an active duty military spouse. My husband's been in the Army for 15 years, and I've been tagging along for about 14 of those years. We've, lived in Hawaii, Alabama, New York. Now we're in Colorado. And I was just kind of looking for a way to get involved with the community and figuring out, where do my skills fit in. And I kind of found a roundabout way joining the voting ambassador program with SFI, having helped friends just in my own little circles everywhere we lived, like one or two here and there, keep their voter registration up to date. I just thought, if there's a place that I could actually do this and help more people, why not? So I also serve on the voting rights leadership team with SFI. So we track voting policies and, upcoming bills and regulations at the state and federal level that could impact our access to our ballots.
No, that's fantastic. And I just want to let everyone in the audience know, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you just want to shout out these wonderful ladies for being here with us today, go ahead and drop those in the comments. And we might be able to answer that in progress, because how often are we actually able to ask those questions live and in living color to the people who know the answers, right? It's kind of a unicorn in the military family world, right? And so I'm going to encourage you to do that. However, if you're catching this on the replay, I just want to let you know to go ahead and drop those comments or questions down into the chat, because we still will be able to answer your question, whether that's us here at NMFA or whether that's our pals over here at the Secure Families Initiative, right? Okay, so we're going to dive in, folks. Are we ready? Are we ready? All right.
All right.
So obviously voting is an extremely important topic to our audience, especially for our military families, because as we all know here, military family life has a way of adding those extra layers of to things that are already complicated to begin with. And so for those who are new to voting, for those who have voted across the duty stations, and it changes from day to day, we're going to talk all about those things. But I kind of want to know, because sometimes where we live isn't really necessarily where we're going to vote. So can you walk us through what military families really need to know when it comes to those logistics of voting, when it comes to making sure they're registered at the right place or meeting those deadlines or getting their ballots in on time? So help with the logistics, because that's part one of that process.
Yeah. So, this is a loaded question. It has multiple answers. but I think I've got it organized well enough that I can break it down. And, if questions pop up, drop them in the comments and we will get to them probably after I finish this. I've been calling it alphabet soup just because there's so many acronyms. But I'm not going to leave you hanging. I will explain the acronym the first time I say it, and then we'll carry on from there. So the number one, like no matter where you are in your voting journey, if you've never registered, if you're already registered, if you can't remember where you're registered, the number one thing to do is to determine your state of residency. And this is a little bit tricky. So I like to think of within our community, there are like 3 different types of voters, but they fit into 2 distinct categories. You're either a local voter or an absentee voter. So if you're a unicorn, if you're lucky enough to be a local voter, that means you reside in the jurisdiction that you're going to vote. And in that case, you're lucky, you get to just use your state's registration form. And you can find those online. It's very simple. You go to fvap.com or .gov, sorry, .gov. That's the Federal Voting Assistance Program. And they have links to all of those state forms that you can access right there on their website. For our absentee voters, there's kind of 2 categories. That's why I said there's like 3 kind of situations that most military spouses find themselves in. However, 2 of them belong to the absentee category. So our absentee voters, our service members usually take us away from home, right? At some point within their career, we end up not in our voting jurisdiction. We've got UOCAVA voters, which is the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, and MISRA voters, which are the Military Spouse Residency Relief Act. So those are kind of our 2 main categories. Obviously, UOCAVA voters are voting from outside of the 50 US states. They're in Germany, Japan, they're everywhere. So the UOCAVA, that act provides protections both to our service members and to you. You can still access your vote no matter where you are in the world. You'll do that through a form on FVAP again. It's called the FPCA. This is the Federal Postcard Application, and it is our very, very best friend. If you are a military spouse, your first best friend is the FPCA, and then your bestie. Because this is the one form that is recognized across the board. All 50 states and I believe territories have to recognize the FPCA. That Federal Postcard Application is where you're going to be registering if you're registering for the first time. It's where you can update your registration if you need to. And it's also going to send information to your voting office telling them where to send your ballot. So no matter where you are in the world, you should be able to access your vote as a military spouse. For our spouses living stateside, you're the MISRA voters. You're voting, for example, I vote in Washington, but I'm currently stationed in Colorado, and I have maintained my Washington state voter registration throughout the 14 years that I've been following my service member around. This is a federal law that allows military spouses to maintain their registration of their home state. So like if you were 18 prior to entering military life and you registered to vote, you can keep that forever if you want to. It also is helpful to anybody who's looking to register for the first time because it gives you choices. So let's say you got married, you moved away, you never registered to vote. So what's your home state? Maybe you're not sure. Do you register where you're currently living? That is a choice. MISRA gives you the choice to claim your current address as your home of record. You can also fall back on, I believe, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, your service member has a home of record. So if you're not wanting to, vote in Colorado and your service member's record is, in Idaho, you can definitely claim his home of record and register to vote in the state of Idaho or, whatever state you want to. Another option is if you have an out-of-state, address on your W-2 or your LES, or you pay taxes in a different state, you are able to also claim those states as your state of residence. So MISRA was a very wonderful piece of legislation that really opened the doors for military spouses and allowed us a lot more flexibility to become voters or to maintain our registration as it was.
So and thank you for that, because that,
was a lot. I'm sorry.
No, it is.
So
but that's the thing. That's representative of our lives, right? Like,
yeah.
Is anything not like that? Like, I mean, honestly, and that's why people like us and people like you exist, to break it down Barney style sometimes, to be able to put it in like actual lay terms so that we can get the job done. And that's really hard for people like us. We start out by going through policy like it's the fun thing to do on a Saturday night, right? But we do it because we're like, surely we are not the only ones who feel this way right now with all of this jargon. And then we look at it and we find ways to help, because that is in and of itself a barrier to access, right? And so like a lack of information or understanding of said information can be a barrier. So just throwing this out there, I know I don't look old enough, but I've got a mini mill spouse of my own. My daughter decided we made this life look so cool. She joined our club, Brittany. Okay. So she's like, I'm going to date her. I'm allowed to. I don't care. She's like 27 and she has voted. And she's voted here, but she now will be able to, I'm looking at her, like I'm looking at you, Jujubee. I'm looking at her because she can choose either the state of Virginia or she can choose California, where her service member's home of record is. And oh, by the way, coincidentally, where they're stationed.
Lucky her.
Right. And that's not a given, people. Don't count on that mess. Is there a place by chance where people can find a breakdown? Does SFI have a breakdown on its website on because I need a checklist. I don't know about y'all. I need a checklist, and she darn sure needs a checklist.
We call it our voter quiz. And so thank you. So we've got a link in the comments. This is our voting resources page. If you scroll down, you can find the voting quiz that helps. Brittany did a fantastic job. The big significant difference is whether you're an absentee voter or a local voter, because it's from there on, it's like different routes to how you do it. And that quiz will help you determine which one you are. And I love your term, Barney style. I might borrow it, MJ. It's so great. Just a Barney style, what Brittany went through. Again, that residency is that key term when it comes to this, right? We might get driver's licenses local or library cards local to where we are. That's just for convenience, right? Where we get PCS. That's not necessarily where your residence is. That home of record is really close to what it is. I think home of record is like your OG, wherever you started this, and it stays the same your whole career. Residency is technically something you could change as you go along if you want. Like Brittany said, MISRA gives us that protection. But you really, what I think of state of residency is like where home is in your heart, where either where you started from, where you want to go back to, you name it. And what's the Barney style most important thing to do is link up your voting with your taxes. So if you have a W-2, if you're employed, whichever state is getting that income tax cut should be where you're voting. If you don't have income right through a W-2, if you file jointly though, think of on the service member side, it's that LES. Because the reason being, if you do register to vote separately from your state taxing home, you always run the risk that both states will come after you for taxes. Because what we've found is when you sign up to register to vote, you're declaring a form of residency in that voting jurisdiction that might give a state opening to go for. So we just don't want people making a financially uninformed choice when we say you can register differently from your state taxes. There's a liability there that we generally advise to avoid. I see your face, MJ. You're making me nervous.
I think that is a very good thing to point out because
because hypothetically that might not be the case for all of us. No, I got you. It's fine.
No, I'm glad you pointed that out because to be perfectly honest, like there are people who unknowingly or forgetting. I mean, we're at the gas pump and forget our zip, y'all. I'm just saying sometimes we may not remember to shift that over when we make a different, you know what I'm saying? And so that is interesting. And since it's a financial liability, if you will, numero uno on your list, check your stuff, people.
Yep. I was going to give some tips next about how you can, make sure you're keeping track of everything or registering in the right place. So are we good to move?
Do you, boo?
I don't want to scoot us ahead if we're not done.
Time. This is Mill Spouse time right now. We're talking all about the military. You've got the info. Give it to us however you want.
All right. So we're 69 days away right now from the election. And if you plan on participating, don't wait another day. Don't wait another day to check. You need to go register. You need to update your registration. There's still time to send in that FPCA form to request your ballot. And I would also just recommend, exactly as MJ just said, make it a regular habit to check your status. And we have the same link that shows you our quiz to, what voter are you? If you scroll down, there's also an opportunity to look at, your registration, to look it up, to find out if it's active, to find out where it's active, if you've forgotten where you last voted or where you registered. And I personally make it a habit to check. I use that tool and I check every January, regardless of the election cycle, just to make sure that I haven't been bumped off of a list, right? Because I don't reside right in the state where I vote. So there's always the potential that, maybe they cleaned up their voter rolls and they don't see me living there. So, maybe there was a mix up, maybe there was a system issue. You just never know. So I always recommend you trust, but verify. And then
make it a hashtag.
Trust, but verify. And then there's also, in the event that you don't receive your ballot, or for whatever reason, maybe you requested it a little bit late, because under UACAVA law, all absentee voters are to receive their ballot 45 days ahead of elections. So if for some reason your ballot doesn't reach you and you're stationed in, Italy is notorious for having a very slow mail system if you're not mailing through an APO. On the FVAP.gov website, there is an option to print out the FWAB, more alphabets for your soup. It's the Federal Write-In Absentee Ballot. And it's going to look like it came out of your classroom, right? Like your teacher gave it to you and you're just doing a pretend election. It doesn't feel real. It's definitely not the same experience as that official ballot. But if you print that out, fill it out, and mail it to your, where you vote, it's their job to make sure that they don't count two ballots. So you can send in your official one, and if you're just really nervous that maybe it didn't get there in time, or maybe it got held up somewhere, you can send in the FWAB, and they will always count your official ballot if that's the one they receive first. So, and if they've already counted your FWAB, they won't touch your other ballot. So it's on them to make sure that you're not doing anything wrong by accidentally voting twice. It's just it's a backup ballot. It really protects, your voice and, the changes that you would like to see made within our election system.
And can I foot stomp the miracle that is the FWAB? Although I also want to foot stomp what she said about it feeling fake. Yeah, it feels fake, but it's real. Advocates who came before us made it possible. So let's honor their legacy here by using it. FWAB can also function as a registration in and of itself. It doubles as an FPCA if you're getting so last minute that say you're mid PCS and it's taking forever for you to know what that next mailing address is. Or I don't know, you're a family who was evacuated from the Middle East when war kicked off this year. And so you don't have a permanent address and you won't anytime soon before this election, right? That FWAB it's a powerful form. And like Brittany said, it's, I think, especially imagine the service member deployed downrange, right? I know we focus on families, and there's a lot of folks that are in limbo, but that deployed service member, this might be their only chance to have any shot of having their voice heard at the ballot box. So yay, FWAP.
Yes, everything I've said that helps us has already been helping our service members, probably much longer than it was, extended to us as well.
Thank you. This is one of those times where redundancy actually is cool. Like, can we just replicate that? Because what works for the good works for the anti. Yeah. And I'm glad we're on like the mail-in voting, because, military families have experienced a lot of different scenarios. It was different for every single family, even if they're at the same location. It doesn't matter. So it's really hard to find any consistency, whether it's regards to information or regards to the actual process itself. So I'm relying on you peeps. We've talked about that piece of the logistics, and we're going to keep talking about it, people. Like, we're going to keep talking about this. Conversation isn't over, and I don't think it ever will be. But there's another part to that conversation, and I kind of want to hit on the why before we get to mail-in ballots, because we want to motivate our audience to understand why they need to vote, whether it's local, whether it's mail-in or absentee. We want them to understand the why, because it's very to feel in today's day and age. I'm dating myself again. It's very easy to feel like your voice doesn't count, and with everything that military families are already juggling, voting can seem like just one more thing on that list. So please tell us, tell the world, the whole world, why is it important for military families to make their voices heard through voting, especially when so many of the decisions that are made by our elected leaders can directly affect our military life?
Yeah, that's a huge question, and the answer, I think it's going to be individual to, the spouse. But I would say, kind of overall, I often hear, oh, why bother? It's so much work. My vote doesn't count. My one vote doesn't count. And that's not true. You wouldn't. So I like to compare my vote to like a grain of sand, right? It's seemingly small, and you would never consider it a beach ever. By itself, you would never consider it a beach. But you get a lot of it, and we could make the whole shore, right? So, we know there's power in numbers, and honestly, that non-voter statistic of just, oh man, how do I even start? So oftentimes this civic responsibility is viewed as like an individual power, but that line of thinking is what makes your vote feel like a grain of sand, especially for those federal level elections. And it's just kind of a backwards way of thinking of it. Think about the whole picture and where you fit in it, rather than where does my vote make this happen. There's power in numbers. We already know that. And right now, the numbers show that in almost every major election, if non-voters had been treated as their own unified political party, they would outnumber both major parties every single time. So that's why it's so important.
Say that again for the people in the back.
Okay. Every non-voter, if y'all were in one group of your own, you would outnumber both of the major parties and their little groups every single time. That's why it's so important that you participate. Even if you do participate and end up joining, one of the major parties, it's small beans what party you are affiliated with, as long as you're voting. Because a blank ballot sends no message. But showing up is the only real way that you can influence any kind of policy and change. So if 47% participation is the current stat for our military connected voting community, imagine what could happen if the other 53% joined in.
Oh,
So
so good, Brittany. Can I add my own why, MJ? Because it's kind of twofold. So there's the historical legacy piece, right? There are literally Americans who died for our right to vote, especially like Black Americans led the way, making sure that our Constitution's access to democracy was fully realized. Generations of Asian Americans, Indigenous Americans, Hispanic Americans, like each group had faced such bravery and such a danger and such odds to fight for their suffrage, not to mention women generically. So it's, there's part of the why, I know for me, that I think a lot of folks probably relate to is this, what would my ancestors think of me not voting right now piece. But I'm going to be cheeky for a second, MJ, and I'm going to add a second why that is not civic, it's your obligation, whatever. I'm going to be cheeky and I'm going to say, guess what? Your one vote, you're right, doesn't matter in that. It will not make a numeric difference in the election. Okay, I accept that. But guess what does? The act of voting, every time that you cast a ballot, you are making a permanent impact on the demographics of your district. And here's how. I was a campaign manager back in the day, and I saw that the average age of adults who were living in our district was 35 years old. So I was making all of these grand visions about talking about affordable childcare and public transportation and using digital outreach, not none of these, mailers that cost a bunch of money. But then an advisor was like, yeah, but what's the average age of those registered to vote in your district? And that average age was 55. And so all of a sudden, our campaign's limited resources had to prioritize a bunch of different issues, right? Emphasis, and had to spend thousands of dollars on those mailers because that average age, that's how they make their decisions in elections. I share that because there are so many decisions that your simple being registered and casting a ballot makes that you will never see. You will never see behind the scenes who decides to run for office, how they decide to run for office, how they decide to govern once they're in government, all shaped on the simple act of creating a permanent voting record. So yes, your numeric ballot may not make a difference in a single election. Your candidate, your referendum, whatever it is, might lose every time, but you have still permanently left an impact that makes your district look more like you, your family's composition, no matter what that looks like, and the issues that you prioritize. And that to me gives a lot more purpose in a purely self-interest, not even the classic, it's your civic duty kind of way, as to why I want to keep voting no matter where the military sends me.
No, and I love that because, so having military kids, right, like grow up in here, like, I'm not going to lie, I didn't vote for the first half of my 20s. I didn't even know that was an option. I thought I was just screwed, basically. I thought my voice just wouldn't and couldn't. I had literally zero idea that there was any right to that. I also didn't have enough to know that I should fight if I didn't. It is whatever, 25. So now, fast forward a couple of years, and I now have two 20-somethings who grew up as military brats, didn't grow up in a household where, yes, we spoke about current events. Yes, we spoke about getting involved. No, we did not speak about how or why, right? Like we didn't. And so here, fast forward to voting age. And I saw myself going crash course. Okay, guys, we're taking we're doing like for military teams. Okay, like that's happening in our house living room right now. I just want to throw that out there because just like you kind of put it just now, like they were thinking, who am I? I'm one person, and it's a lot harder to justify to a teenager, by the way. So, but if you implement it, if you start talking to them about how things work now, once they get to that point, not guaranteeing, no guarantee, might be a little easier on y'all as parents. Just saying. That's my little segue. Shoot, if we can't every now and again throw out some parenting advice, like please don't be me. Like, what are we doing?
I'm here for it. My son just turned 8, so we're only 10 years away from having our first little voter in our house. So
don't blink.
I'm taking notes.
All right. So now that we're here, and we're going to talk about mail-in voting now because it's received a heck of a lot of attention in the news over the past few years, not even just recently, but really honestly in the past few years. And well, with that can come a lot of confusion, maybe some misinformation thrown in there with the cherry on top about what has actually changed and like what has absolutely not. So what I need our audience and myself and my mini mill spouse to know is since the 2024 election, have there been any changes of voting policy that military families should be aware of? And also, I just reiterate what's actually stated.
Absolutely. So I love how the first part, we kind of focus on folks who might not be registered to vote or might be like, it was a long time. How do we get caught up? This is the section. I don't care if you have voted in every single election for the last 20 years. You still got to tune into this part, I promise, because we are existing in what one might call a rapidly shifting regulatory environment. That's my HR speak for. Yeah, there's a lot of policy shifting. So to your point, MJ, yes, what hasn't changed, okay? Mail-in voting is still a thing. Please do not freak out. I know we got that headline on Monday, right? Supreme Court ruling, blah, blah, blah. If you want a more in-depth explainer on this, go to SFI's either Instagram or Facebook. I've done a reel about it. We sent out an email. But the TLDR of it all is mail-in voting is still a thing. We are still on track for that crucial lifeline to democracy that a lot of us rely on being available both this year and beyond, okay? There's legalese happening, but for so far, so good. For what it is worth, SFI is one of the groups helping to push to make sure that maintains the case permanently. But let's also focus on what has changed. So one of the reasons why Brittany and I both wanted to like double, triple emphasize the necessity of double checking your registration status today is because we have seen a lot of states, especially in the last year and a half, use different tactics when it came to assessing their voter rolls. And it has resulted in a higher number of people than normal being removed or shifted to inactive status, you name it. I'm going to highlight a couple states just to give some texture to this, but literally any state, please double check, okay? Alaska is a great state where there was a few weeks ago, it was like normally their routine maintenance, there'd be maybe 100 names they'd have to update, folks moving, folks passing away. This time it was a list of 3,500, right? A huge spike in people that they were flagging for inactive. And a large number of them were like immediately confirmed to be eligible voters. And those were folks who hadn't even moved out of Alaska. So imagine how much harder it is for those of us who were stationed in Alaska at one point and then have since moved on, right? We're not even getting the notification in the mail necessarily. And so it is so easy for it. We're uniquely vulnerable to these purges is like a kind of a loaded word, but these removals, okay? Michigan is another state. They had some legal stuff in 2024, and there was a window of time where we suspect there were folks that were removed erroneously. So even though the lawsuit resolved itself, we know that there might be removals. So Michigan's another state to check. And in Georgia, oh my gosh, Georgia, always infamous for making it really easy to have these what are called mass challenges. So an everyday person is like, I don't think that person really is an eligible Georgia voter. I'm going to challenge their voter registration status to the election office. And the type of evidence that they could use to substantiate a challenge is something as simple as, oh, this person used the national change of address form, showing that they now have an out-of-state address. Yeah, I use that all the time to make sure I can still get my mail forwarded when we PCS. Or having an on-base address, sometimes it looks non-residential, right? Which might mean you're ineligible, but it's clearly a resident. So anyway, point is, sorry, I'm going to get off the soapbox of details. These are a few textured examples. These are states with a lot of military voters in them, especially Alaska and Georgia, okay? And again, not only are our voters vulnerable to being removed, but extra vulnerable to not learning that that has happened until it is too late. So even if you have successfully voted, please double, triple check your registration status today. And please, if you have been removed or anything sketchy is happening, DM SFI immediately. Like email us or send us a message on socials, because we will be able to partner with you actively to resolve it in time so that you can still cast your ballot. I will just say that's even just on the registration stuff. Even if you're still registered and you're casting that ballot again, some states at the state level have changed certain requirements. So like North Carolina, for example, became the first state in the nation to require you to add a copy of your photo identification with your absentee ballot. a really great use of PII, sending it through the mail. Don't you think, MJ? Anyway, I digress. Point being, if you've been a North Carolina voter for decades, you probably didn't know that, because if you are using the FPCA, the federal postcard application, it's not going to like flag FYI, if you're a this state voter, you have this particulars. Anyway, just make sure, even if you've voted successfully, you're updating yourself this year about what this snapshot in time's rules are for your state, about how you can transmit your ballot and what's required. I don't want this to turn off anyone, though. I know we've emphasized how it can be more complicated than it should, but it still is not as complicated as some people want us to think, and it is still worth doing. And SFI is your partner throughout the whole process, so you are not alone when having to vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but I might tell you how it is you can send that ballot back, right? Okay, and then I'm going to do one final shameless shout out, okay? Brittany did a great job talking about Military Spouse Residency Relief Act, or MSRA, and all of its glory. If you are, I don't care what state you're in, but if you are what we would call a MSRA voter, especially if you vote out of state somewhere, especially if it's a state that you personally never lived, because a little bonus right that MSRA gives us is the right to adopt our service member's station, even if we never lived there ourselves, right? Like you married someone who had an old address from a previous duty station and you kind of linked up with them later. That's a good number of us. I don't care what state that is. I would love for you to contact me immediately, though, because we have seen this weird movement at the state level of folks who are in that category kind of getting swept up into attacks on voters more generally. So again, if you are a MSRA voter, if you cast a ballot back home in a place that you yourself would have never established your independent residency at, you're simply adopting your service members, which you have a federal right to do. We want to hear from you, please.
Third, and this is really interesting, because I'm glad actually talking about what is otherwise thought as these niche situations that often occur in military life. Like, it's not systemic, it's not like it's a onesies and twosies, it happens, it's an administrative whatever, right? Like, but oftentimes, if people like SFI or orgs like NMFA don't hear about those isolated incidents, or don't hear about your unique story, your onesie or twosie, then we won't ever know if it's actually a trend. So I highly recommend you reach out to Sarah too. Okay, and okay, so before we wrap up, we usually like to give our guests the last word whenever possible, so that our viewers can be left with a way to take in everything that they've learned, right, and actually put it into action. It's more than just going to your local station or just registering. It's more than that. So to put into action. So I know that SFI is an opportunity for military connected voters to help others in their communities navigate that whole vote. So imagine that, somebody who could actually help you on the ground. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about SFI's voting ambassador program? Who get involved? How can viewers sign up? And drop me a link.
Yeah, definitely. So just to kind of give you an idea how I got involved, because like I said, I'm also a military spouse. I've always voted absentee. Even before I married into the military lifestyle, the first time I was able to vote happened to be the one semester that I was studying abroad in Florence, Italy. So I taught myself how to navigate the fvap.gov website and find that FPCA. So it really wasn't new to me. But if it's new to you, that doesn't mean that you don't belong in the voting ambassador program. You've watched this event and you've gathered a lot of information. We'll have a link to share where you can sign up if you're interested. But, if you have friends that aren't sure how to participate in elections, you can help them just within your circle. You could officially join SFI if you wanted to and get involved in our voting ambassador program. Personally, it's just kind of where I felt I needed to be. I was like, what skills do I have? Where can I put them? volunteering for the SFRG, you know, kind of volunteering here and there, sprinkling it everywhere. And then I finally found a fit, right? We all have to find a place where we fit. So, you know, last year I joined SFI's voting ambassador program. And again, my big why is because you don't say anything by not voting. So when you're able to influence policy and change, that's great. You know, if you're able to just get your vote in, you're doing more than enough. But if you want to help others access their voice so that they too can influence policy and change, then this is you belong here. This is for you. That's really what it's all about. So we just want to give our military community, especially the military spouses who maybe don't know that they have voting protections, a place to either get help or be the help. No matter where you're located, we're made up of mostly, you know, military spouses. We have some veterans on our team. We, you know, every day we just look at different ways to try to close the gap. And I would say, you know, it's a pretty low time commitment. It is what you make of it. So you can help as often or as little as you actually have time for. The whole time you're going to have a team to rely on. You're going to have training materials to, you know, get schooled up on all this FVAP stuff. And, you know, you'll be invited to meetings here and there. It's not a lot. I promise it's not a lot of time to make a big difference. You know,
I just want to say,
training.
so you're saying that if my daughter, who might not know as much about the voting process as maybe even I do, if she wanted to get involved but just didn't know how, you're saying that she would receive information that would help empower her to help others.
Yeah, send her our way. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have the tools, the training, the mentorship, the team support. You can be as involved as you want to be. You know, you can come to meetings when you have the time, but there's always an opportunity to learn. Or, you know, some people just join and then find it very beneficial to like, oh yeah, I have a meeting. I should check my registration to make sure it's up to date. You know, it can be as simple as that. So, you know, working to protect the right to vote isn't anything new. You know, voting history is American history, and we've seen these protections and those efforts like as early as the Civil War. So, I mean, Sarah's more the expert on that. So,
no, I love that, Brittany. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So our entire voting ambassador program is grounded in the legacy and the framing of the Freedmen's Bureau. And if you've not heard of that, definitely look it up. It's inspiring stuff. But yeah, following the Civil War, during the Reconstruction era, where we saw a disordinate amount of voter suppression happening, especially against Black Americans, there was this community effort, the Freedmen's Bureau, within the Black American community to help each other, to educate each other about the way of voting, and to build back that power that federal policies had stripped from them. And it was a super inspiring, a lot of terrible but inspiring stories, right, of the amount of threats that folks faced. That's the kind of historical legacy that has continued as a common thread through, like Brittany said, all of American history. And so we are trying our best to honor that history and to do our part by picking up the torch and carrying it forward for our own community, because everything we talked about in terms of barriers to voting, military voters are uniquely vulnerable, as are people of color, like I said earlier. And so we're just really grateful to have an amazing group of folks like Brittany who tune in and help us kind of show up in the community where people are at. When I was overseas, I got to do some voter registration tabling outside the gym on base. I also hosted a plant and voter registration event where we brought plants to swap like little propagations and also update our registration. Like we made it fun, we made it social. If any of that like sparks interest, if you've wondered, hey, why isn't anyone outside the commissary encouraging folks to fill out this FPCA? That could be you. I promise it's possible. We've done it before and we'll give you the toolkit to do so. And that's not for everyone. Sometimes it's more, you're a digital warrior, and that's okay too. We can do digital voter registration. But yes, it's a great next step toward helping others in your community. And then just briefly, there are other ways to plug in with SFI if this tasting has gotten you inspired. We have leadership teams. These are like our campaign teams, our advocacy teams, where we take lived experience, we translate it into policy advocacy. We've got a whole dedicated leadership team for voting access, for PCS safety, as well as for nuclear nonproliferation. We also have caucus spaces. So especially if you're a military spouse from a community that's not often represented, we wanted to have community-specific spaces. That includes a White Folks Ally caucus that Brittany and I have both gone through, which is really awesome. And then we have monthly member calls. So it's kind of like an all hands on deck where everyone from the different parts of SFI get to report out and share. And those are awesome spaces. And we, of course, have our podcast as well, The Other Side of Service. So no matter what bit of, and that's an extraordinary storytelling platform right there. So hopefully this has gotten you jazzed up, not just to double, triple check your voter registration today, but take a next step of engagement past that too.
No, and I love that. I mean, honestly, breaking it down like this, like we have asked, it's really, and again, I just want to tell our audience, go back and watch the replay. There are going to be things where you think, I don't know what that means. What is that again? Hit the rewind button. Do it. Money. No, but this is great information. I just want to tell us that today, every day, we're at NMFA are listening. But when it comes to things like, for example, we're talking about voting rights. We're talking about the process. If you have comment, questions, or concerns, no matter what, we want you to share your story. But if it has to do with this and you haven't had a chance to reach out to SFI yet, guess what? We can share your story with them as well if you indicate it, right? And so we just dropped that link too. There are going to be more links to follow as you're watching this. All of the resource links, the process links, the registration links, the NMFA links, the SFI links, all the links, right? And you can book them because that's what we do, right? A billion tabs open at any given time. When it comes to voting, a lot of people believe, oh my gosh, I shouldn't talk about it. I can't talk about it because it's become a highly charged subject. But what I would like to put out to our audience is this. Our service members raise their right hand and swear to support the Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic. And we should honor them by exercising our constitutional rights for their service. That, at its most basic, primal level, is why I choose to vote. And I hope you think about that as well. So, until next time, and we will have these lovely ladies on again, I am very certain. Until next time, I would like to thank Sarah, thank Brittany from Secure Families Initiative, and everyone. Together, we're stronger. Bye.